thanks so much for coming. We have a sick group of panelists up here. I'm going to wait till we're recording before I introduce them, but we are recording. So we have Matt Jeffries from Rebellion. We have Katie Golden, and is an experienced executive producer who works at Bungie, Turn 10, Sega, I'm probably forgetting, Adult Swim. And Will Turnbull from Supergiant, who obviously creators of Hades and everything else. So thanks a lot. So really excited to have a conversation with these folks about some of their experiences with Xbox Play Anywhere, but more broadly, their experiences with developing for multiple screens and multiple devices, and how to do that in the best way. This is a sponsored session. I work for Xbox. I'm wearing a vintage Xbox Play Anywhere t-shirt from when we first launched the program about a decade ago. I'll talk a lot about Xbox Play Anywhere. We'll go through a few slides here. The questions I have for the panelists, I've been really clear that they should just talk about cross-screen development, cross-device development. So a lot of what the answers they give may relate to Xbox Play Anywhere, but it might also relate to just typical cross-platform development between, say, Xbox and PlayStation and Steam and Switch. So I just want to make it really clear that the panelists are in no way like asked to or required to only talk about Xbox. And then I also think just before we get started, just to define some terms, for us at Xbox Play Anywhere just means a game that has a shared entitlement between the Xbox version on console and the Xbox version on PC. So that gives the right to players, if they get the entitlement one place, they have it the other place. Typically, this is handled by having the same product ID on the back end, not required. They also have a shared cloud save between each version, so your save just moves with you. And also typically gives players the rights to stream the game any place they can. All games in Game Pass are streamable, and we launched a program called Stream Your Game, we'll talk about in a second, so that for people with Game Pass Ultimate subscriptions, they can even stream games which they own, which are not in Game Pass. And the streaming is available on PC, on console, on smart TVs, mobile, PC handheld, sticks like the Amazon Fire Stick. I personally have probably contributed more money to Amazon than I necessarily wanted to, having to buy a new 4K Fire Stick every single time I go on vacation, because I always leave it attached to the TV, but it's a wonderful way to play. So we'll get started. I have a few slides I'll go through. I have some great questions, or I don't know if the questions are great, but I have some questions for our great panelists. And then we really want to make this as interactive as possible. We have a mic right there. Once we start to get into questions, if you've got questions for the panelists about their experiences, if you have questions for Xbox, just don't be shy. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong window. Really quickly, this is Microsoft's mission. We want to bring the joy of gaming to everybody, and we've always said that that's about the games you want, where you want, when you want, and that mission has not changed. It's been a cool year for us. We've done a hardware refresh. We've made a bunch of improvements to the Xbox experience on PC. We introduced Stream Your Own Game, and we've really been focusing a lot on Xbox Play Anywhere. Some places that has really come out very obviously is this ad campaign we did, which was really, really fun and got memed a lot, but had really, really high engagement. I think players were really interested in this ability to play their games anywhere. I'll show, just for fun, I'll show the ad that we used to launch this campaign.
This for that, this for that, this for that, this for that. Who's the black sheep? What's the black sheep? Now not who I am or when I'm coming, so you sleep. Well, you heard the others, only still the lovers. Then of course, the choice is yours. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I feel good with this, for this is where it's at. Where it's at. This for that, this for that, this for that.
Cool. So that was a campaign we did. It was fun. It got memed a little bit, but it was also, I think, really, really well received. And I think importantly, you saw the console at the heart of the presentation, and I think that's just an important thing to note. So when we think about multi-device gamers and people playing on multiple screens, on their PC, on their Xbox, on their streaming devices, what's really interesting is we really feel that this is the future, right? And the data backs us in a lot of ways. You can see here just some age range from different generations and how many of them are playing on multiple devices. And with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, more than 50% are currently play games on multiple devices. And for Gen Alpha, gaming is their #1 leisure time activity. And so we really think the opportunity is there to serve this need by enabling players to play the same game on multiple devices. Part of that has been our stream your own game opportunity. So this lets people stream games to every place they can stream Game Pass games if they have an entitlement to the game, they bought the game, and they have a Game Pass Ultimate subscription. Our top markets have been US, but also some really interesting ones, places where maybe it's a little bit harder to get your hands on a console. And we've actually seen a lot of players, as soon as this launched, actually buying and playing exclusively via cloud. And so that's been a really interesting thing. I think in the US, we also see a lot of use of cloud streaming is adjacent to having a hardware device. And so, hey, maybe, you have access to this game through Game Pass, and that's awesome, but like, are you sure you're going to like it? Is it worth the download time? Just may as well just start streaming it, give it, a few minutes and see if you like it. Or, my personal use case is I stream a lot of flight sim because it's pretty big, but like a lot of times I go someplace, I'm like, I want to fly over this, that I don't necessarily want to do like the full, 200 gig plus download. So, I accidentally kicked my laptop down the stairs on Monday, and since then it likes to hit the space button by itself. So, or maybe it was just excited to see the ad. So Xbox Play Anywhere, we've already launched more than 1,000 games into the program. If you hop on the Xbox experience on PC today, you can and go to the store. You can sort by XPA and check some of them out. I think the great things about XPA is really just a way to reach more players with development efficiency. You don't have to develop more game, and then just provide that seamless experience across screens. So this is the end of the of this presentation, and so now we'll turn to the Q&A with our developers. And I mean, I guess the first question, and we can just go down the line on this one. Are you multi-device gamers yourself? Or do you play on multiple screens? And if so, do you tend to play the same game across multiple screens or different games on different screens?
Yeah, starting down here. So I am a multi-device player. I play on PC quite a bit. I play on Steam Deck and Legion Go, and then I also play a lot of mobile. My favorite games across multiple devices tend to be indie games, and I think that they are games from 15 years ago that really started to be able to adopt this trend, because AAA games couldn't come to devices like mobile, but indie games could. So my favorite games are games like Slay the Spire, FTL, Into the Breach, where I'm not as obsessed with bringing my progression between the devices, but I bring my gameplay mentality between the devices, and it's been fun to be able to pick them up where I am.
Cool. And that was Will. Sorry.
Yeah.
Could you talk closer to the mic?
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Katie?
Yeah. Okay, how's this? Good. Ooh, look at all those thumbs. Yeah. I like my lanes. Obviously, I am a multi-screen gamer, but I'm a couch gamer, and then I like mobile. So in times where I am changing screens, it is out of pure convenience for me. So an example that comes to mind is I had a baby about 10 months ago. And if some of you had kids, you'll know that the baby will either sleep for like 15 minutes or on you for 2 hours, and you can't really move. And so that means I don't get to relocate out of where the baby is sleeping. And so a PlayStation controller and an iPad showing up so I could keep playing Final Fantasy Rebirth. It's a fantastic example of this multi-screen environment where it's like, oh, this is great for me because I get to keep playing. And then, of course, I love my Switch docked and undocked. Those two feel like two different experiences to me. But again, out of convenience, I'm traveling. And I don't want to put down Tears of the Kingdom, so I'm just going to pack it up and take it with me.
Cool. I also spend a lot of time traveling. My job involves being away from home, probably 2 weeks out of every 4. So any game that I can take on my laptop from my PC at home that I can also play on console and play on a portable device is helpful. For me, something like Diablo 4 is massively important because I'm here in America, but I can still catch up with my buddies and play games with them, and I can just log in and that one character is there and all of my content is there and all of my entitlement is there. And I think there are 2 things here. One, it's good. All of us are doing this and we want to do it, but we also know it's hard, and what's making it harder is, as consumers, it's what we want and it's what we expect. So we have to try and get ahead of it and trying to make it as easy as possible.
Cool. I think 5 years ago, the conventional wisdom was much more that, hey, if you're making games for multiple screens, make a touch screen, make a match 3 on mobile, make an action game on your Xbox, and make a strategy game on your PC, and that people didn't want to cross those streams. They had specific types of games that they liked to play on different devices. Have you seen that evolve? I think people are more likely to play the same game across screens now, but I'm curious what you guys are seeing.
Good. I think if you look at one of our main IPs, like Sniper Elite, you can go and get it on PC, you can go and get it on console, you can go and get it on iPad. And what we're seeing is our consumers saying, it's my game, it's my content. I want to play it how I want to play it, when I want to play it. And I personally love the fact that I can play Sniper Elite on an iPad, and when I do it, I will sync up a PlayStation controller with it, and that's how I tend to play it. But I have friends who like playing it on an iPad mini, and they think it's perfect with touch controls because it just fits in their hand really well. It's not up to me to tell my customers how they want to play. And if some want to use controllers, great. If they want to use mouse and keyboard, great. The challenging thing for me as a dev is making sure that when I'm designing a game, I have enough tools to look at UI scaling, to think about font scaling, to understand that my game has to be intelligent enough now to look at what it's running on and understand what multiple input methods it might have to deal with.
Yeah, what we saw on some previous games that I've worked on, especially that were games as a service, is there was that older mentality of, okay, there's my PC friends that are playing here, my console, my Xbox friends, or my PlayStation friends, and then even players having universes and where I'm with these friends on this night playing on PC and these friends on console, and this was just kind of understood for a while until we started hearing back from the player base, like, could we not? Like, it's technology. Is there any way we could just not? And I think that's where we start to see some of that mellowing out of more of, okay, we've been doing it this way, but is there a way that we couldn't? And it being a very high request coming in from players of, I don't want to have different friends and ecosystems and even different players that I'm spending hours and hours in to build up. And so yes, I think they started to see some games started to shift, and then we started seeing other games like, well, this game does it. Why can't we be more like them? And then our players going, yeah, why can't we be more like them? We go, oh God, okay, we have to make this work for everybody.
Was that in relation to cross-play, or just making sure your save was the same across?
It was cross-save just to start, because if you don't even have cross-save, which is the inability to save your progress across different platforms, then you are sitting down and saying, okay, well, I have 17 hours on this version of it, and then I have 5 hours on this one, and then one of them wins as a result, because that's unsustainable. And so you sort of have to pick one of the platforms and just go forward. Even if it's not your favorite platform, the ecosystem and your friend base will decide for you.
One of the games that I was always super envious of as a game developer was Limbo by Playdead, because it was one of the early Xbox 360 games and was tremendously successful on Xbox, but because of the way the game was designed through its inputs and its lack of text and its immediacy, it worked everywhere it went, and it worked. It sold really well in China because there's no text, and when we started to think about designing experiences that work on multiple screens, Limbo was always a huge inspiration. And when we set out to design games now, one of the big things is thinking about all of the different screens that the game will be on. And some of the biggest constraints typically are around, for us, because we have lots of narrative in our games, text size, UI, UX, and making sure that also localizations, because like it was in Chris's slide, we have players playing all over the world and in markets that we may not have even expected when we set out to make the game. So making sure that we set up nice, tight constraints around making sure German text will never run out of a box, but also won't have to get scaled down to a level that it's unreadable by those customers from the get-go is super important.
Cool. Do you think about the, Katie knows this acronym, I don't, just like the first user interface experience for as people are switching?
FTUI, everyone. First time user interface or first time user experience. FTUI, yes. And I'll explain more about that, is you generally, you do see this with console and PC games, but more so with mobile, because if your player is a mobile player, you're competing for their attention against their music, against text messages, their social media, all of that. And so much about making a successful mobile game is capturing their attention and holding them. And so that means while you have them in that first couple minutes, if they downloaded it, you make sure they understand the game. And so when they don't feel intimidated and leave, or they do feel compelled to come back, they'll know what to do. Versus a console or a PC game, you have more of a hot lead there. There's a controller in their hand, they've sat down, they're paying attention, or they have a setup, they have a gaming setup for it, but mobile, not so much. And so really encouraging developers to make sure you have this FTUI, first-time user experience, to make sure you do capture their attention.
Yeah, and a huge part of a Supergiant game is that there is a lot of immediacy, and so like a game like Hades, when you're playing on mobile, we don't layer in new buttons as you activate any abilities. You get those buttons right away. You can use basically all the base buttons you'd use on an Xbox controller from the get-go, and so you can experiment with your play styles right away, rather than having to generate muscle memory on a device that doesn't have much tactile feedback later. So from our first-time user experiences, the really important thing is there's not a lot of tutorialization, but you can experiment as a player from the get-go, and that, we think, leads to better play experiences.
That's awesome. As you started thinking about shipping on Xbox Play Anywhere or cross-screen on other devices, what's the most surprising thing you've learned during the experience?
Probably in terms of engagement.
Yeah.
It's incredibly additive. It's not cannibalistic. What you see is people who do play games on multiple screens play more and more and more. I know anecdotally that if you look at some of our games maybe on PlayStation, where people have access to things like a Portal, we're seeing longer gameplay sessions and going longer into the evening. So what people are doing is they're playing a game at home for a bit, and then they turn off their machine and go to bed. Now they're turning off their machine, getting into bed, and grabbing a handheld device and playing for another half hour, extra bit of time. So yes, people are playing longer on more things, which is great. I think the other thing is now it is just becoming kind of expected. It's not now, look, if you get our game, you can play on lots of devices. It's actually, if you don't do that, people are like, but that's what I expect now. Why don't you do this?
I think a surprise that I will add is how hard it is to do, and there's not really a rule book on how to do it. So if you are releasing on a platform, you have a pretty hefty set of instructions from each of the consoles on how to launch. But I mean, you said this earlier. Here be dragons when it comes to cross save and cross play. So factoring in a good amount of time in the dev cycles to be able to start this one early, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go to an example from Hades was in Game Pass, and one of the cool features we added was xCloud support. And as we've been thinking about Hades compared to, say, Bastion or Transistor, which are games that we brought natively to mobile before, Hades just had a lot more use of the entire Xbox controller and had a much more sort of frenetic play style. And so, as we'd sort of been thinking about mobile, we clearly had on-the-go devices like Steam Deck and Switch be part of a very active part of the play experience for Hades 1. But when we thought about mobile touch interface, we were pretty worried that it would just be overwhelming because you have to represent all those buttons on screen. And one of the things with the xCloud integration, we brought in custom glyphs, and we were able to sort of prove out the experience on mobile really quickly. We then did, after that, go through and create a native mobile port of the game. But the amount of effort that it takes from the, hey, this is cool and it kind of works, and I'm really excited that I'm playing my Xbox version of Hades on my phone, to the pixel perfect mobile game, is a tremendous amount of work. So it was really fun to be able to get to 80% there really quickly, and then really hard to do stuff like get haptic feedback on touch controls to bring elements into the game that really allow for that perfect play experience on mobile.
At any point, did you just thinking of bagging it? Were you just like, well, they could just use a controller?
Yeah, so we... It's one of the crazy things is, we were able to stand up Hades on the phone with controller in 2 days. And then the rest of the dev cycle is so long to make sure that every UI/UX menu, which in Hades is a ton, work, and that everything reacts well. And then you're also still supporting some controller and touch controls. And if you disconnect your controller in the middle of the boon select menu, you're not locked out of the game. So it's the amount of work that goes in, as you were alluding to, Chris, to make it perfect is a lot. And so there is some beauty in having just oh yeah, here's virtual controls and you can play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. But if anybody's played Hades on when it was in xCloud or now the mobile version today, it is one of the, first of all, for a game that's already one of the best games ever, is one of the best touch control systems ever. So as folks are thinking about how to make their games as just elegant as possible on mobile, I think it's a great one to look at.
And I recommend going and looking at car racing games because they do a really good job with their inputs on mobile and adding rumble and all sorts of fun things. They're really dialed in. So that's where I went for inspiration.
That's awesome. We'll move on to another question. How important for you guys are the sort of player promises, things like the Steam's like Steam Deck verified and that sort of thing to support when you are moving a game from what we'd think of its native home to a new screen?
So, from a slightly boring publishing kind of perspective and selling your game, it's very important. In actual fact, I would say on something like Steam Deck, it's kind of critical. You want to be in an area that says, this thing works really well on the thing you own. And consumers, I'm one of them. I love my Steam Deck. When I go and buy a game, the first thing I go and do is look what plays great on Steam Deck. And therefore you want to make sure your game gets that verification sticker because that's what people want. You don't have to have it, you don't need it, but knowing that you've done those checks, knowing that, as I said earlier on, things like font scaling, which is the bane of all of our lives, actually work is important. Because if you don't have that thing working, it immediately puts barriers up. And there are lots of games trying to get like someone's share of day, trying to get time with someone, and they're going to go with the one that has that lowest barrier of entry. So yeah, for us, I think it's pretty critical.
I feel like my answer is boring and publishy sounding also, but as a dev, there are additional steps that you go through to get that badging, but that also guarantees things like better carousel placement. It's stronger for the publisher if you're falling in line by their guidelines, and so it makes your game, it gives your game more visibility and better to sell, which it seems like a small thing, but when you're sort of going down the trenches of launching and releasing, that extra little bit of we're going to have maybe another 4 hours of spotlight time because we have the appropriate badging, that it starts to really add up, especially in those first couple hours after launch.
I definitely heard selling games is good, so if you can do something to help you sell
Any
more,
gimmick you have to sell the game, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really, I'm hesitating to even say this out loud, but like one of the beauties of certification on console, on all of them, is that they are establishing that unlike a mobile game or unlike most PC games, that the games are working at a level that is acceptable to customers. And Steam verification is lighter than a console cert, a lot lighter, but it does provide really important information to the customer, and it establishes basically best practices more than anything else for people who are developing a game on a smaller screen. So I always like it when platforms go through and take efforts to make sure the content works in the platform, because that's the platform's customer promise. And then as a developer, most of our work is trying to make sure that we provide the best experience possible, and there's implicit and explicit sort of guidelines there. For us, setting stuff like min spec. If we set a min spec on a project, we're gonna try not to move it up. We haven't moved up, I don't think. But that isn't, hey, the game just runs, but you should be able to have a really good Hades or Supergiant experience on a device that meets the min spec.
Building on what Will was saying, I'd actually kind of almost forget looking at it as a developer or a publisher and just think of it as a consumer. I want to be able to go to a store and see games that have been said, this does run well, this is going to be good on this thing, and that gives me a sense of confidence as a purchaser.
Cool. As you're thinking about implementing the things you need to make a game feel smooth across different screens, as a developer, what's the first thing to look at? Is it controls? Is it fonts? Is it save system? Is the answer to that question
Is it
yes?
all of the above?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those things.
I think controls are probably first and foremost, and then it's going to be aspect ratio of the device and font size, especially when you're thinking about multi-screen. Making sure that you don't have to reinvent the whole game UI to make it work on a different platform is really important. So yeah, we try to set those guidelines and those constraints really early in the project, so we don't have to go back and do extra work at the end to make it fit or make it work correctly.
I think equally important is UI. So I think this is really like a perspective question here. Like controls are important, but UI also. I can think of experiences that I've had of playing games where it feels like an unfinished PC port, where really I'm playing it on a PlayStation, but this is better suited for a mouse, and I can feel it, and the players can feel that too, especially in that jump over to mobile, where you have a much smaller screen real estate, and then the player isn't looking up; they're holding it and they're looking downwards. So it's a different environment altogether. And UI feels like one of those spaces where it's very easy to lose the player because they can get irritated and they don't actually even really comprehend why they're irritated. They just know they're not having a good time, and they're not. Something doesn't feel quite right. Maybe they can't put their words around it. But not all UI is created the same across PC, mobile, and console. And so, just like controls, because that is the haptic inputs there, is the visual outputs they're getting. I'd say equally as important.
I think there's also a question of what do you actually want to do? Because there are many, many levels to this. You know, do I just want to make sure that my PC build will work on a Steam Deck? That's not too hard. Do I want my multiplayer game that I'm playing on an Xbox to connect to Steam and to PlayStation? That's a bit harder. That involves more work. Do I want to actually be able to share my save and have cloud saving and moving my save around? That's more work. And then finally, you know, what do I do about things like entitlement and things that I've bought on different platforms, which is again more work. So, you know, you can start kind of peeling this onion and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and your workload is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But normally the more work you do, the better it tends to be for people.
Cool. When we first launched Xbox Play Anywhere and xCloud or cloud streaming with Xbox and Game Pass, there was a lot of trepidation about games streaming and that sort of thing. Have you folks seen in your games, like whether it's streaming through our service or folks who are streaming, you know, on PlayStation or other systems, has it been okay? Like, have you gotten user complaints? Has it, you know, how's it turned out? And yeah, I'm just really curious on your perspective.
So for a game like Hades, where it's an action game running at 60 and everything is happening really tightly, the biggest worry with streaming is just if we have, you know, a 80, 120 millisecond return time from the device to the cloud and back to the device, that you enter into a loop where you blame the device for the reason why you took damage or you lost to Hades rather than your ability to play the game. And so from a design perspective, that's always what we're looking for, is trying to make sure that you feel like in the controls and then, you know, in the play style that you're playing and on the device you're playing, that you really feel like it's you as a player that is in charge of your destiny within the game and not the handicap of whatever device you're playing on. So latency is typically the thing that we're most concerned about with a cloud experience.
Yes to all that, but I'll add this: the stakes get higher when the player is playing a competitive game, and so then they're staking their ranking on the cloud and the latency, and it does become a lot easier to blame the game. And I feel like the question is funny. Like, do you get complaints from players? Like, why, yes. Why, yes. Thanks for asking. But especially in that multiplayer environment, we'll feel players just don't trust the environment because they want what feels familiar and what they see and can feel is working.
I think it's anecdotally, if we look at some of the feedback we've had from some of our player base, it almost becomes an accepted trade-off. If I want to have a really good connection and I want to have it work, I'm going to play it at my expensive rig down in my study. But actually I don't. I want to kick back and play it on the sofa, and that means I'm going to play it on a device that is a 720 screen, not a 4K screen. Or I decide to stream it instead of playing it locally, and I'll accept that maybe I'll have some latency issues every so often. Now, if that is a competitive game and it's happening, I'll probably go, oh, that's really annoying. I should have probably just gone and played it on my main rig. But, you know, if you're playing Final Fantasy, you said you were playing on iPad? Yeah.
It's okay.
You probably had some moments where it was a bit laggy. You probably had the odd moment where something probably went a bit wrong, and you're like, it's all right, it's fine.
It's all right. I'll start over, but, you know, if it's competitive.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, one of those things in general when we think about all of this and people playing on multiple screens, it's, again, personal choice. It's letting our customers choose how they want to engage and what they want to use. And if they accept that maybe streaming might every so often have an issue with latency, if they choose to do that, we should be there to support them.
Cool. I want to open it up to questions. So folks have any questions either about the development side of XPA or the business side of XPA or cross-device things, please feel free to come up to the mic. While you're gathering your questions, I'll ask one last question, which is just, what are the pitfalls here? What are the biggest mistakes you could make if you're intending to take advantage of this? And what should people just really watch out for?
Yeah, sure. I think it's just more of a moment of advice because this is what I ran into. If you do have a game that a player can cross-play or cross-save in between consoles, if you mention PlayStation in an Xbox game or Xbox in a PlayStation game, that is an XR or a TCR, and you'll fail cert. And it's like the most unsatisfying fail cert you get. You're like, okay, next RC, here I go, and you go and make a text edit swap, and it's good. So if I impart to anybody, any information upon anybody, it's make sure to be mindful that you will fail cert if you mention one of the two.
I would just say, if you've never done this, it is quite hard the first time, but it's incredibly worthwhile, and it's what we're all going to do at some point. So you might as well get ahead of it now. Start reading the documentation, start trying it, start thinking about those edge cases, because you are going to end up there. And if you are starting out and building a game at the moment, do think fundamentally, as Will said, about things like how your UI is going to scale on screens, what those text sizes are going to be, all of that stuff. Think about it now, because it's easier to plan it now than get 12 months down the line and then realize you've got a problem and try and retrofit things in.
So playing on one device and not being able to transfer your save over to another device is not a great experience. But what's a worse experience is when you're playing on a new device and you overwrite your existing save file. So the biggest thing with any cross progression is make sure you hold the customer's save to be holy, and you create enough mechanisms to make sure that it's just not an automatic check based on timestamp or something that then goes through and does all of the save merging. So just anytime you move player saves from one device to another, just be really, really careful, because that's the number one way to make the saddest customer is deleting their 3,000 hour save.
We have a partner right now who's got a game that is not XPA, and they'd like it to be XPA, but that means that almost necessarily the save files are completely out of sync, and so they're going to have to do a lot of work to actually build UI into the game, which will either give people the choice of which save file to use, or maybe allow for multiple save files. So it's non-trivial. So it's definitely something to think about early. So. I want to say thanks a lot, folks. If you've got questions, please feel free to come up and we'll address them. And if you want to say your name first, that'd be awesome for the recording.
Hello, hi, I'm George. Thank you guys so much for your advice and information, and it's been extremely helpful. I'm a developer. My game is on PC, and I'm starting the process of trying to bring it to console, Steam Deck. Steam Deck has been my first priority. But so I kind of have a specific question, at least when it comes to controls. But a big feature that I'm proud of in my Steam Deck implementation is rebinding. I added the ability for players to rebind any of the controller buttons to any action in the game, more so because my game has a lot of actions, and I couldn't decide on a standardized control scheme. But hearing you guys talk, I'm realizing that might not be a great feature to keep as I try to, if I want to have it be on Xbox Play Anywhere. So I guess my question is, for your games and your experience, do you guys just go for multiple preset control schemes? Do your games have rebinding or any sort of, I don't know, what settings would you recommend?
We actually support rebinding kind of on everything. Again, it's part of the concept of saying it's your game, you choose how you want. We will have a default system that we put in, and that default will be therefore echoed across a PlayStation, an Xbox, a Steam Deck, and most controllers have got 2 sticks and 4 shoulder pads and a D-pad and 4 main face buttons, and as long as you build a UI around that, you're probably okay. But I actually think for accessibility, for personal preference, letting people bind stuff is really important. One thing, always ensure that if you do have anything involving like a stick, that people can invert the axes and make sure it's both of them, because you think, oh, they'll just need to invert up and down, and then you'll get loads of emails going, actually, I like to press left to go right and right to press left, and my brain can't deal with this, but fine.
Yeah, for accessibility in particular, it's really nice. It's just assuming that a player will play it like you do is a big assumption, and there's so many different customers out there that will either be coming from a different type of controller or just have different needs when playing your game, that being able to rebound is really important. One of the most fun Hades stories is someone actually took an actual pomegranate and made it into a controller and bound all the keys to parts of the pomegranate skin, which I have no idea how they did, but they beat Hades in the whole game using an actual physical pomegranate as their controller. So
That's amazing.
I'll send it to you, Chris.
That is awesome.
I'll add that I feel like rebinding is more of table stakes for a game in 2025. So players having an expectation they come into your game and they can rebind, and feeling like they can, then feeling like that they didn't get something that they wanted. And so I won't speak to any suggestions on how the presets work or whatnot, but I would caution against, maybe I should take this out because of this problem. I think it's for game dev's hard. This is hard. And yeah, players just want to see something like that, especially on a PC game.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to add pomegranate now to my
Yeah.
list of support.
And one other thing too with Steam is like the Steam hardware survey is a great source of what types of controllers players are playing with. But if you're starting with Steam, you can also start to work on all of the different console controllers and ship them to customers and start to get feedback from people with keyboards who will tell you that their controllers aren't working.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rega. Thanks for the panel. My question is adjacent, I suppose, because you talked about the first-time user experience, and that's something that we really started to think about. We're actually started to build our tutorial now, and I just wonder if you have any tips and tricks related to that. I heard you talk about that you don't do a lot of tutorialization, but you sort of give the player like, an area to experiment in. So if you just have any ideas, would love to hear.
Yeah, the tutorializations like are really, the people who do tutorials really, really well. For us, the real thing that we try to do with the Supergiant game is that, you load it up and you're right in it and you're just in the world exploring it from day one. And they're all different types of players. There are players that will go through and hit every button to figure out what it does. There are people who will dive right into the dialogue. And with a game like Hades as a roguelike, that sort of exploration is sort of endemic to the type of game where you're going to be experimenting with different boons, you're going to be experimenting with different abilities that you get, and experimenting with the controls is just part of it. So before I was at Supergiant, I ran publishing at Humble Bundle from the beginning through the first 5 years. And FTL is one of my favorite games of all time. And Justin made this wonderful demo for me before the game was out that had and it was beautiful. It was this amazing walkthrough of exactly how to play, but it was like 50 slides. And I remember starting to click through them and not playing. And then I just played FTL when it came out, and it was one of my favorite games of all time. And so I think one of the really big things when you're thinking about tutorialization is you want to provide information to the player, but you want to do it in a way that's not overwhelming. So for us, the way that's not overwhelming is just letting them have at it and not having abilities that are too hidden behind future play progression. We do add layers of complexity on later, but by that time you're sort of a master of the core controls. But yeah, I guess my biggest thing as a player is try not to information overload your players with explanation about how to play it up front.
I think there are, from my perspective, two very specific areas. One is that don't underestimate how quickly people have other things they can be doing, other games they can be playing. And back when, I was buying games as a teenager and I was getting things like, stuff from my Super Nintendo, it cost me $50 and there weren't really that many reviews, and even if I bought a game that wasn't that great, I would complete it and learn how to do that game. In an age of people having Game Pass or whatever service they have, giving them hundreds and hundreds of games. As Chris was saying, one of the advantages of streaming is people can just try a game quickly to decide if they're going to download it. If you're lucky, those people maybe give you 7 to 10 minutes to decide if they want to go and actually play the rest of it. So you're kind of caught in this weird dichotomy where you want to have this really cool, interesting first 5 to 10 minutes, but you also don't want to overload them and scare them away because they've got a million other games they could be playing.
Yeah, I think those are both great pieces of advice. I always want a full tutorial, and then I also always want an option that just says, like, I'll figure it out. It's kind of bad, but like sometimes if you feel like you know the grammar of the game, you don't want to go through the tutorial because you know the game, and then sometimes you do. So even just doing a meta outside the game, just an option for players, might be something to think about.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joel. One thing that scared us about a recent release with crossplay was entitlements such as DLC and crossplay saves. Advice.
Yeah. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to give the Xbox answer first. Like on Xbox, just inside the Xbox ecosystem, straightforward. Like it's pretty straightforward between Xbox and Xbox PC for entitlements for DLC and save. But I know that if you're thinking about being as broad as possible and having cross-network.
I'm going to come back to that because I think a really important part of this and an incredibly complicated bit is this is cross-save. And we've lucky got someone here who kind of like did the first big thing of this. So I'm going to throw you under the bus on this one and say, why don't you talk about cross-save?
Sure. I want to make sure I understand the question. It was around any advice on how to manage DLC and things like that.
Yeah, you don't, because they might have the entitlement on one platform and not the other. How do you make sure that their cross-slave doesn't suddenly ruin the fact that they bought that entitlement on one? Because of course you can't automatically they buy DLC on Xbox and then on PlayStation, you can't presume they have that. So but you want to be able to let the player jump back and forth because they might be, Xbox might be their main platform, so they don't want to spend the extra money on another platform for it.
Yes, I will share that this has been one of the largest problems that I run into at the ending out a development cycle. We had a situation where players were not getting the entitlements for their DLC from one console to another, and that is it's a EULA violation because they paid for it and now they don't have access to their paid content. And so I had all of my engineering team focused on this one P1 or P070 bug. And so there's all sorts of things that got moved to the patch because I desperately had to resolve this. It was a store bug functionally when all was said and done that had to get resolved, I think, on the platform store in itself. So I think the first thing that comes to mind for advice is you're ahead of it. You're thinking about it already. And, oh my goodness, you whispered something to me. I'm going to throw back to you.
So the actual issue of entitlement across different ecosystems is weirdly not something that we can fix and can control. Yeah. That is, and I've been ranting about this for years, it's involving getting the platform holders in a room and them agreeing on what they're going to do. Yeah,
it was the Windows Store when all was said and done. It wasn't our bug, it was actually them. And then I had to get them to come into my triage and say, I need your biggest resources on this.
Yeah, so look at something like Fortnite. Fortnite Store functions differently on Switch than it does on other platforms. That is where we are with one of the world's biggest games, and it doesn't have this solved. So don't worry that you haven't solved it. We haven't solved it in general. I think the one thing you can do and one thing you can focus on is if your game has multiplayer, you need to get ahead of cross-play. Cross-play is what consumers want. They don't care that their friend has a different console. They want to play with them. And it's not up to us to make people feel like they bought the wrong bit of hardware. Yeah. You've got a PlayStation, you've got an Xbox, you like playing on Steam, I like playing on EGS. We need to make a way of making it work. Sadly, there is no demo code for this. You can't go on to PlayStation and download code from Steam that works. Microsoft help. They have things like PlayFab, and they're trying to do things. But at the end of the day, as devs, you're going to have to put in the hard yards. Now, I'd say it's worthwhile. I would recommend doing it. I wish it was easier, and probably one of the reasons I'm here is because I've been badgering Chris and others for years to try and make it easier, and hopefully it will. But it is worthwhile. The other thing that you need to think about is who people are and what their identifiers are, because people will probably have different pseudonyms on different platforms. And at some point you have to pull those together under a master pseudonym so you can identify them. Once you've got that working, once you've got cross-play working, cross-entitlement is something you'd like. And I recommend you go and talk to your account manager at each different platform and try and get them to agree on something. And until they do, some things you can make work, some things you have to stay in certain ecosystems. Sorry, Will.
Yeah. So this is not a Supergiant problem, but I worked at Clay Entertainment previously, and we had a big account system for Don't Starve Together. And I guess my big caution, it's great when it all works out, but to layer the complexity of your cross progression, your cross inventory system slowly, get it stood up on one platform and then get it talking between two platforms. And as you sort of get all of the quirks of one platform talking to another platform worked out, then go to try to add a third one. But if you try to do it all at once, it's a real tricky web of interdependencies that you may not be able to fully solve for.
I'd add one big gotcha, because it hit us, and it's the one that I try and warn everyone about. If you are doing crossplay, and that means you are connecting a PlayStation and an Xbox and Steam and everything else, be prepared to what that does to your underlying QA budget, because you then have to start testing every permutation. And we have a 64-player game, so I had testing plans which were like 63 Xboxes and one PlayStation. And then what happens when we add in Steam and Epic? And you can imagine the Excel sheet that grows from testing every permutation of everything. And let's not forget that, for us, we still support previous generation Xbox as well, and PS4. So our QA testing deck was huge. It's worthwhile, but it is hard.
Thanks.
Cool. We're just about out of time. And I don't know if anybody else has a question, but we're just about out of time, and I know you've got to go to the airport.
I have to fly home.
So I will just say, hey, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to our panelists for all the insight on just what this means. I really think this is the future of games, and you got a really good view into it from some of the experts. So thanks again.